everyone, and welcome to the Convergence podcast. The Convergence is a space designed for post-secondary students and young adults to explore and deepen their faith. It's a space to think, question, doubt, and ultimately to worship. We are so glad that you are here. For today's podcast, we have a message from a dear friend of UCM, Vanessa Kordupel, on how to live out of our identities as witnesses. Vanessa, the floor is yours.
Friends, nice to see all of you and meet all of you. My name is Vanessa, and you can blame Kelly for the reason I work in ministry, actually. And you can blame Kelly for the reason why I moved to Alberta. So a little bit of context for me. I'm from Northern Ontario, although I've lived in Alberta for 13 years. So I think that counts as an Albertan at this point, maybe. I don't know. Some of the Albertans in this room are like, no, Vanessa, you're still from Ontario. That's fine. I actually was doing an internship with InterVarsity, which I currently work for right now. And at the time, they asked me, hey, will you consider moving to Calgary? And I said, heck to the no. Am I moving to Alberta? Nope. I was living in Toronto at the time. I did not want to live in Toronto, actually more than I didn't want to live in Alberta. So that's my cred. I don't like Toronto as much as you guys don't like Toronto. But they said, why don't you just fly here and see the campus and see what you think? And so I flew, and my staff partner at the time was brilliant and actually set me up a coffee with Kelly. So I sat in his office as a 22-year-old, bright-eyed, excited, bubbly, all of the things. And Kelly pitched the vision of the campus to me at U of C and pitched the vision of campus ministry to me. And I said, I think I want to work alongside this guy. So if anything goes bad tonight, it's actually just Kelly's fault. So you can just blame him. I don't think anything will. But again, my name is Vanessa. I currently work for InterVarsity Christian Fellowship, which is another campus ministry, but we also do high school ministry and we do camp ministry. And I love to have my hands in a lot of pots. So I currently work in our high school ministry. And my job is actually cheering on what we call 16-year-old missionaries to think about missions in their school and to help them think about how do they share the gospel really well in public schools in particular. So I really love that work. I'm a hockey coach by nature. And so I love being a coach. I love cheering on people. It's really, really fun. I was born in the 1900s, which for 16-year-olds and probably many of you is like last century. So one of the questions one of my students just asked me today, in her bright-eyed goodness, she's 15, she looked at me and said, Vanessa, what were the 90s like? What was 1990 like? I was like, I was one. Like, I don't know what the 1990s were like. She was like, what were people wearing? I don't know. I also grew up in Northern Ontario. Everything comes later to Northern Ontario, like 20 years later. So it's a bad representation. But I've been in this current role since 2022 and was on campus, like I said, at U of C and MRU for about 8 years before then. And one thing I often say is that I went into ministry kicking and screaming. So some people, particularly from my cohort of people growing up, I grew up at a Pentecostal camp, I grew up at a Pentecostal church. They have these holy experiences where they're standing at the altar and God says, you're going into ministry. And I said, heck to the no, am I going into ministry, Jesus? And I actually bolted out of the altar conversation pretty quick. And that was like the next 10 years of my life. So my plan was to go to law school and to be a family lawyer. I was going to be rich and I was going to have a lot of things and I was going to be nice and settled. And God said, nope, you're not. And I said, oh, crap. I really want to follow God. So a lot of my ministry is kicking and screaming. I said I would never be a youth pastor. I work with youth. I said I never would work for InterVarsity. I work for InterVarsity. I said I would never move to Alberta. I live in Alberta. It's just the theme of my life. I don't often say to God anymore, God, I'm never going to do that unless I say to him, God, I'm going to marry a rich surgeon. No, reverse psychology doesn't work with God, but that's fine. Yeah, God has a sense of humor in my life. I hope that we can have a bit of fun tonight too. I love having fun as we talk about scripture because I think scripture is fun. And I think Jesus calls us on a magical, amazing, crazy adventure with him. And our text tonight is that. It's a crazy adventure with him. So tonight we're going to be talking about our identity as witnesses. And you guys have been talking about identities for a while, for the last couple months, exploring what does it look like to have our identity rooted in something. Culture, I think, would want you to root your identity in things that you have, or the thing that you do, or the people that you're connected to. Christian culture may want you to be rooted in God's identity, child of God. We root ourselves in all sorts of different identities all the time. I think we've gotten to the point, which is it is hard to break down who we are. It is hard to navigate. It is hard to share. What is our identity? I find it intimidating because my identity feels like it's always changing, right? I am not who I was at 21. I'm actually quite different than I was at 21. I'm still learning about myself, right? I was sharing with some of the girls before that I've given up coffee this week, and I've learned I'm more resilient than I thought I was, right? I always thought I was resilient. I can do hard things. Such a first world problem, but that's a different conversation. For those of us who are brand new in sharing this kind of way, what was it like? Somebody who has never done this before, what was it like for you? Zoe, do you want to share? I know Zoe, so I could pick on her.
When we're supposed to talk about ourselves, I can do the best job at that. And talk about my interests. It's not necessarily
Yeah. What else? Thanks for doing this experiment with me, friends. Any other thoughts? Do you want to share? Is there a thought that you had? What's your name?
Isaac.
Isaac.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. It was difficult to come up with ideas that were things that you enjoy doing or people.
So for us to share about ourselves and share about our identity, we really have to understand ourselves. And that takes time to experience ourselves, to get to know ourselves. Have you guys ever gone on a date with yourself? Have you ever gone out to a restaurant by yourself or taken yourself? My clutch date is I go for pedicures by myself. Have you guys ever done that before? Have you ever sat in a restaurant by yourself? It's a really interesting experience, right? Because you're thinking, wow, what do I like to do? What do I like to eat? What do I enjoy? I love this theme of identities and witnesses because I think the beauty of following Jesus is that he gives us fundamental and foundational pieces of our identity that we get to explore. And so one of them is witnesses. And we're going to explore that tonight. I am a sucker for a good crime and trial show. I don't know if you guys are into good crime shows, like Law and Order, Good Wife. I used to watch a show called Drop Dead Diva. Has anybody watched? Tina, I knew we'd be friends. Okay, I'll quickly say this. The premise of Drop Dead Diva is that this woman who's a model dies. She goes to heaven. It's unclear if she's going to stay in heaven. She presses a return button. She ends up in the body of a lawyer who's the opposite of her. And the whole show is about this lawyer. It's the worst show, I have to tell you. It's real corny, but I love it. I love it. And I'm a sucker for a good crime show. And so when I think about witness, or I think about what does it mean to be a witness, or what does it live in the identity of a witness, I think about somebody who is going to give proof or evidence to bring a just conclusion to a good legal case. This is how you can tell that I wanted to be a lawyer, right? That is the satisfying thing. Somebody who can say, this is what I saw, and this is what I experienced, and that brings justice. Is Legally Blonde beyond your generation? Okay, my favorite moment of a witness is when the daughter talks about going in the shower after having the perm, and Reese Witherspoon is like, you can't shower after a perm. And she's like, you're right, I killed my father. I thought it was my stepmother. It's the best scene of a witness, right? That's what I think about. I think about the epic, that's not true. And she's like, yeah, I know, I killed him. And it's just the best moment ever, right? And I think about that when I think about witnesses. And I'm glad that that's not actually the definition of a witness that we should talk about, because I don't think I'm ever going to have the moment where I'm on a witness stand and Reese Witherspoon is like, why did you have a shower after a perm? I did have a perm in high school, but I went swimming after and it actually came out really quickly. So that actually upholds that whole theory. So that's my definition of a witness. It's like a good crime show. And then you have in the church, or Christian culture, where we think about evangelism, sharing the gospel, the good news, right? We think about witnessing as evangelism, sharing our faith. And for those of us Jesus folk, it brings some deep connotations of like mission or being sent out. Sometimes it also brings some like deep connotations of things that have been hurtful in sharing the faith. I lived at downtown Toronto for a year before I moved to Calgary, and like 2 minutes from Yonge and Dundas. And there was always the same guy with the sign, right? You know what I'm talking about? Those signs that say kind of horrific things that are trying to win people over to Jesus, right? So we have Vanessa's like trial and crime witness, and then we have the church culture evangelism witness, sharing our faith, which is kind of a mixed vibe. But tonight we're going to talk about the very holy definition of witness that I found on ChatGPT today. Which I have to tell you guys, I am kind of jealous that you all have ChatGPT in your university time. I have ChatGPT'd a recipe today. I ChatGPT'd advice today. I took a screenshot and sent it to my therapist and said, I think I have a new therapist. And she said, please no. And I said, I'm just joking. I wasn't. I also ChatGPT'd some research that I was doing on the TV show I'm binging, which is The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. But I did ChatGPT this a couple weeks ago, and I think it gives us a really good definition of witness that we're going to use tonight. So if you guys are okay to go into the holy definition of ChatGPT, we're going to stick with this one, even though I do love the Reese Witherspoon witness. So this definition of witness says somebody who has intimate knowledge of an event, a change, an experience from their own personal observation, and then they share the knowledge with those around them. I'm going to read it one more time. So a witness is somebody who has intimate knowledge of an event, a change, or an experience from personal observation or experience, and then they share the knowledge with those around them. How does that definition work for us? Does that work okay for us tonight? Does ChatGPT hold up a little bit for us? Kaylee, did you just shake your head at me? Kaylee, come on. Okay. If this is true, before we jump into our scripture, if this is true, to be a witness, we need to experience things and then we need to share them. So we can't just share them, we have to experience them. And we can't just experience them, we have to share them. So many times we want to share what we don't know, or we've logically processed, or even something somebody else has told us that we want to share. And so many times we have this really amazing experience and we don't want to share it, right? A little uncomfortable about sharing it, or maybe it won't translate. But a witness is somebody who experiences it and shares it. So we're going to dive into one of my favorite scriptures. When I first read this story at a inductive Bible study when I was a university student, with InterVarsity, I said I was a Christian, but I wasn't really a Christian, to be honest. I was living a really fun life. I remember saying, I don't believe this is in the Bible. So then I spent again, remember, Vanessa's a kicker and screamer, right? So I was like, I'm going to go look. It's in the Bible. It's in Mark 5. And I'm going to read from the CSB version, which is what is on the screen. So the helpful subtitle is Demons Driven Out by Jesus. I do love the subtitle sometimes, and sometimes I don't, but this one I think works. So it says, they came to the other side of the sea, to the region of the Gerasenes. As soon as he got out of the boat, a man with an unclean spirit came out of the tombs and met him. He lived in the tombs, and no one was able to restrain him, not even with a chain, because he often had been bound with shackles and chains, but had torn the chains apart and smashed the shackles. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and on the mountains, he was always crying out and cutting himself with stones. When he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and he knelt down before him, and he cried out with a loud voice, "What do you have to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I beg you before God, don't torment me." for he had told him, "Come out of the man, you unclean spirit." "What is your name?" Jesus asked him. "My name is Legion," he answered him, "because we are many." And he begged him earnestly not to send him out of the region. A large herd of pigs was there feeding on the hillside. The demons begged him, "Send us to the pigs so that we may enter them." So he gave them permission, and the unclean spirits came out and entered the pigs. The herd of about 2,000 rushed down the steep bank into the sea and drowned there. The men who tended them ran off and reported it to the town and countryside, and people went to see what happened. They came to Jesus and saw the man who had been demon-possessed sitting there dressed in his right mind, and they were afraid. Those who had seen it described to them what had happened to the demon-possessed man and told them about the pigs. Then they began to beg him to leave their region. As he was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged him earnestly that he might remain with him. Jesus did not let him, but told him, "Go home to your own people and report to them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you." So he went out and began to proclaim in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him, and they were all amazed. Who has heard this story before? Oh, wow, you guys have. Oh. Okay, so I feel a bit bad about is this actually even in the Bible? Little context, a little bit of the journey that we're on in the book of Mark. Heads up, the gospel writer Mark loves a lot of movement and loves a lot of action, and he also loves the word immediately and amazed. Those keep coming up through the book of Mark, right? So they're on the move. They never really sit down to have dinner or tea. They keep going, and he loves using the word immediately and amazed. So up till this point, Jesus has been on a parable sharing roadshow. He has invited the crowd that has been following him into a deeper understanding of the kingdom of God. Right before this, he's talking about the parable of the sower, which is where the farmer sows all the seeds, and it depends on the soil type on how that seed actually gets planted. And the whole application is your heart in a place where it's soft enough to receive the word of the Lord? From there, he leads the disciples to the other side of the sea. Does anybody know what he means by the other side of the sea? Is it literally just the other side of the sea? Does anybody know? Anybody want to take a guess? I'm going to call on Zoe again. Zoe's going to be my caller. Zoe, do you want to take a guess?
The other side of the sea.
It's Gentile territory. So he's leading them out of Jewish territory to the Gentiles, which crosses their religious, social, comfort boundaries, sometimes gender boundaries. Like, it's not like we're just saying we're going to Edmonton as Calgarians, which sometimes, I'm an Oilers fan, so sometimes going to Flames games feels like the other side of the sea. I mean, you guys would have to be good to actually say that, but I think this is actually like taking them out of their comfort zone and taking them to the place that they don't want to be. They've been told not to go there. It's unclean. They don't want to be there. It's beyond their comfort zone. And Jesus is like, let's go, you guys. Let's go on a little mission trip, right? He's not leading them into a walk in the park. Also, a little snippet of a story on the way across the sea. There's a big storm and Jesus is asleep in the front of the boat. And the disciples are like, "Do you not care if we're going to die?" And Jesus wakes up and he's like, "Why are you afraid? I was just sleeping. Don't be afraid. I'm Jesus," right? So the disciples are not like at their best going on this mission trip. Jesus is taking them on a journey. They're not rested. They were terrified they were going to die. They've been wrestling. Am I a good soil? Am I a bad soil? What does Jesus mean by all these parables? Often, just a little snippet, often when Jesus calls us into mission, we are not as put together as much as we hope we are put together. He often calls us when we are at our messiest to go into mission. I wish he called me when I was at my best. I wish he would give me a week-long orientation of apologetics and evangelism from some great big speaker in the States that will come and be like, "This is how you do it." It's not how he does it, right? He calls messy people into messy situations. So that's just a little snippet. If you're looking to get yourself together, I don't think that's how it works. I think Jesus calls the disciples when they're exhausted and they think that they're going to die. And he calls them to a place that they don't want to go. So they get to the other side. They're not at their best. And a man with unclean spirit runs to Jesus. The CSB, I really like the CSB version of the Bible. I don't think it says it accurately when it says that Jesus or this man comes to meet Jesus, right? It's kind of a soft way of saying like, he comes to meet Jesus. Hello, Jesus, right? That's not what's happening. So there's nothing clean about this interaction. The man is living in the tombs. People have tried to restrain him with chains. He smashed the shackles and the chains, so he's bruised, he's cut up. He's smelly, he's dirty. He's living amongst the dead. He's loud. They put him in the tomb because he was just crying all the time, and they couldn't get him to stop crying. He's obnoxious. He's terrifying. They don't know what to do with him, right? So the town is just like, put him in the tombs, right? Like, we don't know what to do with you. Put him in the tombs. He's filled with an unclean spirit, so he's an unclean guy in an unclean territory. So he's really, really unclean, right? He's like double unclean. And the disciples are in unclean territory dealing with an unclean spirit. So they are really, really out of their comfort zone. So the man is really, really unclean and they are really, really out of their comfort zone. So this is no easy moment when you're following Jesus. This is probably not what they were expecting. If I was a disciple, I would be expecting to roll into churches and have people lay out big feasts and say, Vanessa, welcome. And I say, welcome to me. That's not what the discipleship journey is. It's probably a good thing I wasn't a disciple because I think I'd be a bad example. But we're getting there, right? There's also no orientation to this experience. So the man has not been given a nice apologetic presentation. The man just runs to Jesus. What do you guys think? What would your experience be of this situation at this point? If you're a disciple, I've told you what mine would be, which is I expect a nice little feast and hello, Vanessa. What would your experience be? You guys actually have to talk back at me though, because if I have to talk this whole time, you're going to hate me after an hour. So what would your experience be? What are you thinking? What are you thinking? Ella, what are you thinking? I know. You introduced yourself at the beginning. So now I'm asking, what are you thinking?
Good question.
What would you be thinking if you were the disciple going into this?
Going into this random place with crazy man.
Yeah.
I think I'd be a little scared. I mean, there's obviously a crazy person. And I feel like I would be a little bit doubtful maybe of Jesus' full powers, right? Like, how sure that he can handle this man? He's clearly unstable. He can't, like, the people tried to chain him up, so obviously for a reason. I think I'd be a lot scared for myself and expecting, like, protection from the town instead of just, like, pursuing that one man. Yeah. And I think also I probably want to focus more on the people in the town. But it seems like Jesus is just focused on, like, the one crazy guy sitting in the tombs. Which, like, what the heck, man?
Jesus, there's lots of Gentile sinners over there. Let's go hang out over there. Yeah. All right. Ella said, why hang out with the crazy man when we can go hang out with the rest of the town? Paraphrased. She'd be scared. Logan, what would you be feeling?
I would say I probably would have a lot of good justification for why we shouldn't go to.
Yeah, good justification.
It's got lots of good biblical reasons that we could.
Yes. Lots of good biblical holy reasons why you shouldn't be there. Yes, I love it. What else would you guys be thinking about as the disciples at this point?
Maybe like, why are we focusing on the Jewish people? Like, why are we going to the other people?
Yeah, yep. Why aren't we focusing on the Jewish people, the God's people? Yep. You guys, I would be freaking out. That's the truth. I would be freaking out. I wouldn't be having any of these logical thoughts. I'd be freaking out because Jesus just took me to a tomb to hang out with a man who the rest of the town exiled because he's out of control. Okay? And this man who's out of control runs up to Jesus and yells, "What do you have to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? Don't torment me." So not only is he crazy, he seems to recognize Jesus, right? He seems to recognize Jesus right away. Immediately, the unclean man recognizes who Jesus is and his authority There's no lecture that Jesus has given about the Trinity or theology. He knows immediately. Sometimes we just need to get people before Jesus and let Jesus do the rest. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes we just actually need to introduce them to Jesus because Jesus speaks for himself. And the best person to identify himself is Jesus, right? Sometimes we just need to get people, and that is a hard job sometimes. So I don't want to say like, it's just easy to get people before Jesus. That is hard work. But sometimes we overcomplicate witnessing. Sometimes we overcomplicate it. So this man, he runs up to Jesus. Well, the CSB says that he comes over to meet him. He recognizes Jesus right away, and he identifies himself as Legion. Does anybody know what Legion means in this culture? Anybody? Karis, you're nodding. What does Legion mean?
It's a range, but typically we agree it's about 3,000 to 30,000 soldiers in a Roman army.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, so it's a unit of a Roman army of between 3,000 and 6,000 soldiers. So there's a lot of unclean spirits in this man. And yet he still says to Jesus, don't torment me. I know who you are, Jesus. There's 3,000 to 6,000 of them. And they're looking at Jesus and they're saying, don't torment us. We know what you're capable of, right? That is crazy. That is crazy, right? That is shocking. There's so much in this text about unclean spirits and their territory, and I'm not going to focus on any of it. And if you guys would love to have a seminar on it, I'm sure somebody else would love to have that seminar, because honestly, I don't really understand all of it. But what I do want to focus on is Jesus's response. So the man runs up, says, there are many of us. We are terrified of you. Please don't torment me. And Jesus says, come out of the man. I'm paraphrasing the Vanessa version. Come out of the man. And the unclean spirits are so terrified that their solution is to be sent into pigs, right? Their solution, when it comes face to face with Jesus, is to say, send us into the pigs. And it's not just one pig, it's 2,000 pigs. 2,000 pigs. So it's not just a pound of bacon at the grocery store. If you're a bacon eater, I'm not a bacon eater, but if you're a bacon eater, it's not one pig, it's 2,000 pigs. And they say to Jesus, send us to the pigs. This scene is like crazy, right? Like, can you imagine watching this demon-possessed man say to Jesus, send us into the pigs? And Jesus is like, okay, let's send you into the pigs. So he sends them into the pigs. Those 2,000 pigs run off the cliff to their death. They're not floating in the water, like happily floating. Yay, we're piggies. No, they die, right? He sends them into the pigs. They run off the cliff and they die. Does anybody know what is significant about 2,000 pigs in a town dying? What is significant about that? Why is that shocking? Did somebody say something? Yeah, go for it. Why is that shocking?
Probably a major source of food for them that's now just gone.
Yep. That's their entire economy. Kaputs. Right? So Jesus is saying, this man is valued at the entire economy of an entire town. Right? Like, think about that. That is crazy. Right? That man has just been released from unclean spirits. He's been living in the tombs. He's been exiled. Nobody has anything to do with him except for the men who are attending him. I don't know what that means, right? I don't want to know what that means. I don't think they're doing a good job of it. Jesus has just said, you are worth more than 2,000 pigs. He's given a new story. He's given a new value. He's given a new life. He's given a new chance. He's released from death. This is the story, right? This is the story for us Jesus folk, for us non-Jesus folk, wherever you find yourself. I hope you know, even if you don't think of anything else I've said tonight, I hope you know that Jesus values you more than the entire economy of an entire town. That is how he sees you. If you walk away with anything, that is the story. Jesus looks at you and says, you are worth more than 2,000 pigs or the entire economy, the entire oil and gas sector, the entire agriculture sector, the entire insert here, you're worth more. And this is what's just happened for this man, right? This is shocking. This is huge. Like, you can't make this. Okay, small little side note. If you are not following Jesus yet, you can't make this stuff up. Like, this is like crazy, crazy stuff, right? Like, this is crazy, crazy stuff. I don't know what author could write this better than God, just to say. I don't know. But for some reason, Jesus has said to this man, you're worth more, all of this. And from that, we have some experiences of some witnesses, right? So we have the men tending him. We have the townspeople who we find out the men run to. We have the man himself, and we have the disciples, right? So we have a couple of groups of people who have just witnessed this crazy, crazy, crazy thing that just happened. And they all experience the man being released from Legion, either directly because they've seen it or indirectly because somebody has told them and they've run to see it, right? They all see the value system that Jesus is putting on this man. They've all witnessed it. They all witness the way that Jesus does ministry and the impact that that has on people, right? And the impact that that has on entire communities. And they all have an intimate knowledge of an event, a change, or an experience from personal observation or experience, and then they go share it. Now, they all respond a little differently, right? Their sharing isn't all the same, right? So let's just look at them for a minute, one by one, on each, how they each respond in their witnessing of the event, right? The big event. So let's talk about the men who tended the man and the pigs, right? So they have the most intimate knowledge of what happened because they see it. They knew the man before. If you're tending the pigs near the man in the cave, you probably hear him crying louder than other people, right? So while you're tending the pigs, you have the man in the background like wailing, right? So they have a pretty intimate experience. They see what happened. They run to the townspeople. They say, this is what happened. This is what Jesus just did. We are not quite told how they shared it, but we are told that they are compelled to run and share, right? That's what we're told. They are compelled. We need to go share to the townspeople. I can imagine they're afraid. They're shocked. They're still trying to sort it out. If you guys have ever witnessed a miracle, it takes a while to wrap your brain around it, right? Like it takes a minute to get your brain, even if God releases you from like something in your life that has been really hard or holding weight over you, it takes a minute for you to like think about it. I remember my first year of ministry in InterVarsity, we have to raise our whole salary, which at the time I was like, there is no way I'm going to be able to do this, right? There's absolutely no way I'm going to be able to do it. I remember the first gift coming through and looking at the online portal and being like, huh? That gift just came through? Like, what? It took me a minute to be like, these people believe in my ministry? What? They believe in me? Are they crazy? What's going on here, right? It takes a minute. So I'm guessing they're still sorting it out, but their instinct is to run and tell the rest of the town. That's all we're told about them. The next witnesses are the townspeople. So they get the indirect version of what happened, right? They get told, this is what just happened. This is crazy. Then they run back to see the man, what Mark describes as sitting there dressed in his right mind, right? And they are shocked. They are blown away. They one day have exiled this man to the tombs, and the next day they're looking at him, talking to him as if we're just talking here, right? That's crazy. And their response is they're begging Jesus to leave the town. They're fearful. They're afraid. Get out, Jesus. We don't want you here. And honestly, I don't blame them, right? Like, Jesus just came and messed with them, right? Why are you valuing these pigs over this man? I don't get it. I don't blame them. How could you sacrifice what we have? Also, they're Gentiles. They don't have the story of the Messiah coming, right? They're not waiting on the Messiah coming. So they're like, who are you? What do you have against pigs, right? Like, that's our economy. So that's them. Then we have the disciples. We're not told how the disciples behave or respond. The only thing we can imply is that they actually, in comparison to the townspeople, they're not begging Jesus to leave, right? They're actually staying with Jesus. They continue on the journey. So there's something going on for them where they're like, we want to stay with Jesus, right? The mission trip has led them closer to Jesus. It has been a wild ride. A wild ride. I hope your trip to the Dominican Republic is not this wild. If Kelly takes you near pigs, bolt, okay? But they don't beg. They choose to stay. That's their witnessing experience, right? They've seen it happen. They choose to stay. The fourth witness is the man himself, right? He's the one who's just lived through this miracle. What a journey of transformation for him. Can you imagine what that must be like for him to sit there and no longer have to live in tombs? Like, that is crazy. And he's so excited. He runs to Jesus and he says, let me come with you, Jesus. I'm in. Let's go share. And Jesus says, actually, go back to your townspeople and go share what I did for you. And he does. It says that he went and he proclaimed to all the Decapolis and he shared about what Jesus had done for him, and they were amazed. Amazed. The gospel writer Mark loves this word, amazed. They were amazed. Every story. They were amazed. It means like a terrified surprise. If you guys have ever said yes to God, the response is a terrified surprise, right? It's often this like, I don't know, but I'm excited. Maybe a little kicking and screaming if you're unholy like Vanessa and you're like, I don't want to do this, but okay, I'm in, right? And it's the terrified surprise. The whole Decapolis is a terrified surprise. Here's a little fun fact for you guys. This is the first Gentile missionary in the Gospel of Mark. So if you are not Jewish in this room, your lineage of faith, according to the Gospel writer Mark, goes back to this man. Right? If you're not Jewish, I'm not Jewish. At one point, I thought I was like 1/32nd Jewish because my grandparents are Ukrainian and Polish. Turns out we're not. Turns out it really was like 1/85th to the 7th or something, like it's really far. So if you are not Jewish, your faith lineage ends up back to this man. So this man going and sharing, this man saying, Jesus send me back to the townspeople. This man going means that you are actually sitting here in this room. That's pretty crazy, right? He is so excited. If I was this man, again, there's many reasons why it is good that I am not a main character in scripture. If I was this man, I'd be like, Jesus, really? They rejected me. They sent me to the tombs. Really? What are you thinking? I want to go with you, Jesus. I don't think this man felt that. I think he was like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to share with everybody, right? Like, I don't think he was a Vanessa thinker where he's like, but Jesus, they rejected me and I'm a people pleaser and I like people to like me. Like, I don't think he's thinking that. I think he's thinking, I just need to tell everybody the story, right? So these are our four witnesses. Let's tie it back to us. So there's so much in this story that I love about meeting Jesus, experiencing Jesus, and sharing our story of meeting Jesus. If you are in this room, you've either directly met Jesus or you've indirectly met Jesus. So if you are a follower of Jesus, some of us who are here who are committed followers of Jesus, we have experienced directly Jesus' story and transformation in our lives and how he's changed your life for good. I keep saying that changed for good. I saw Wicked last week and there's a song that's like, because I knew you, I'm changed for good. And it keeps going to my head through every time I say that. So if it looks like I stop, it's because that's where my brain goes, is Alpha by Glinda. Anyways, see my Wicked nails. Anyways, back to the text. Some of you who are here who are not followers of Jesus, but you were invited by somebody who knows Jesus. Maybe you've heard a part of their story. Maybe you've indirectly experienced their story with Jesus. Maybe you only know Jesus has met this friend of mine and he's been good to them. And some of us in this room have been amazed by what Jesus did in our lives. We are terrified, surprised by what Jesus did. And some of us have to run and tell others. Some of us are afraid of telling others what we're experiencing, right? These are all places where we all fit. Heck, I fit some of these all in one day, right? I fit some of these in one day. If we are to live in the identity as a witness, we must know what the experience is that Jesus has done in our lives. We must know the intimate, the small, the big, the chaotic, the peaceful details of how he has met us and how he's changed us for good. We must know that it's had an impact on us and that it's been a good impact. And it must send us into sharing about that experience. For me, I grew up in the church. So my story is that I grew up in a Christian home. When I was 10, my dad left the church because of a big church split, which is its own thing. But my mom continued to bring us to church. And throughout my teen years, my experience with Jesus and his work in my life was always just a head knowledge thing. I don't know if that was some sort of rebellion from the church culture I grew up in, which was very heart based, but it was very, very head focused. I could tell somebody around me what I thought Jesus had done in my life or what I thought Jesus wanted to do in my life. I had experiences of Jesus transforming my life, but it was all it didn't register, right? Which actually, if you know me, I'm a pretty big feeler. As you could tell, I'm a pretty big bubbly feeler kind of person. So it's a bit weird that disconnect happened for me. And actually, when I'm not in a great place with Jesus, that's what happens again. Everything goes really logical. I'm like, well, Jesus is obviously going to do this thing because that is what my logic tells me. I'm not logical about anything, right? So you should not listen to me when I say logically, this is what Jesus is doing in my life. That is a bad sign. You need to look at me and be like, the rest of that is crap. I needed to pray for a long time that Jesus would help me see himself as the one who offered me the new life experience. I needed to pray that he would show me where he was transforming me in my life. And actually, I still need to pray that pretty frequently, that Jesus actually brings it to my heart and lets me feel and see the experience of what he's doing in my life. This is why community is so helpful for me, because I have friends in my life. Even Kelly and I had coffee this week, and Kelly was like, do you remember that thing 10 years ago? And I was like, no, but you do, right? And that's why community is so important, because people are like, Vanessa, have you not seen where you've grown, right? Did you not remember what God did in that situation? It really helps me actually see the thing. It's like I was living the experience of sharing our identity exercise that we did at the beginning, but I was living in the this is what I do. I'm an auntie, I'm a sister, I'm a friend, I have a car, I like to play hockey. I was keeping it very I wasn't actually getting at who I was. And for some of us, I think the invitation out of this to be a witness is actually saying to Jesus, help me experience what you've done in my life. Help it be an experience that I can hold, that I know the details. I know how it feels. I know what it was like. I know where you were working. And for some of us, it's actually help me to not run away in fear from what you're doing in my life, right? Help me to be amazed, the terrified surprise. But help me not to bolt it and say, Jesus, get out of here. I don't want to be near you. You're too much, right? Living into witnessing identity is all of these things. It's chaotic, it's disruptive, it leads us out of our boundaries of comfort. It calls us into places of tension, not conflict tension or fighting tension, but unsettled tension. And it's all for the sake of others hearing our stories of meeting Jesus and hoping that they will meet Jesus too. We see this in the disciples. They cross to the other side. The man, he goes to his own people. crazy to think about how Jesus says, here is the good experience for you, and go share that so somebody else can meet me and have their own experience. This man is like such a model for me because, again, there's no question of inconvenience. There's no question of lack of comfort. He's not like, Jesus, I don't have training. I haven't received an orientation on this mission trip. Can I do an apologetic track? Can I do a seminary degree? Can I do a youth ministry cohort discipleship year? He just goes because he can't keep it to himself, right? He can't keep it to himself. So a couple of years ago when I was praying that God would actually like bring this to this, I started making this joke that I must have something on my forehead that says, tell me your life story, because everywhere I went, people wanted to tell me their life story. So an airplane, the hairdresser, I had like my hairdresser is my friend's sister. She's a youth pastor's wife. She went on maternity leave. And so I went to a random salon on my day off and I thought, this is great. I'm going to read my book for book club. And 2 minutes in, my hairdresser said, so are you religious? And I was like, okay, here we go. Here we go. The grocery store, you're like checking out and the grocery store clerk is like, can I tell you about my day today? And I'm like, yeah, tell me about your day. The gym, which you guys gets really awkward when you're like sweating on the treadmill and somebody beside you is like, do you know Jesus? I just think you may know Jesus. And I'm like, yep, I just swore 2 minutes ago because I hurt my ankle while running, but I know Jesus, right? Like the places I was going, as I was praying, that my experience became this for me. The places I was going, in the routine things of my day, people were asking me about my story and wanting to share theirs with me. I don't think it's because I have a friendly face, because on airplanes I don't have friendly faces. Often it's because I'm tired and I'm actually quite an anxious traveler. So by the time I get to the airplane, I'm like, okay, I'm fine. I'm not going to die today. I think it's because the story of what Jesus was doing in me was leaking out of me. It was leaking out of me, right? It was like sending me to share. Have you guys ever had that picture of like a water bottle with holes and you're pouring water into the water bottle? It's not going to stay in the water bottle. It's just going to pour out, right? I think that's what God was doing when he was bringing my experience here. He was saying, Vanessa, it's just going to leak out of you. And I'm not standing up here saying that I'm always ecstatic to share my story with people around me. There are many days where I wimp out. What a conversation starter when somebody says, so what do you do? Because then you get to say, well, I'm a missionary within a church organization that works with teenagers, telling them about Jesus, right? Like it's an immediate conversation starter. I've gotten really good at when I'm really grouchy. I've gotten really good at saying that I'm a director at a not-for-profit. And they're like, oh, cool. And then they move on, right? Or I'm a youth outreach worker. And often the response is, what meaningful work? I'm like, yeah, such meaningful work. And then you move on, right? So I wimp out like regularly. Not because I'm holy, but because sometimes you just want to get your hair cut in peace, Jesus. But if we are going to be a disciple of Jesus, if we're going to live into our identity, we are going to share our story. It's going to leak out of us. It's going to need to leak out of us. Because the call to witness, it's to share our intimate, detailed experiences of our transformation with Jesus. To the townspeople we are called to, whoever those townspeople are, your classmates, your families, your soccer team. For me, it was a long time. It was the beer pickup league I was playing with a bunch of women in their 50s, right? Those are the people that Jesus is calling you to go share your experience. But just a couple of questions to think about it. So the first is, how have you experienced transformation from Jesus? Again, it's that idea, if we're going to be witnesses, we need to know what the experience has been. And if you haven't met Jesus in a transformative way yet, what is holding you back? Or maybe if you haven't met Jesus and you're not a Jesus follower, you could just answer, why are you here tonight? What brought you tonight? And maybe what stuck out to you from the story? And then the third question is, what holds you back from living into a witness of what Jesus has done for you? How may Jesus be inviting you into this identity in a new way? Thank you guys for letting me speak to you tonight. It's been a really big honor to be able to share a bit about my story and to share about one of my favorite stories. And I just feel very honored to be here with you guys. So,
Vanessa, thank you so much for that message, and thank you for listening to the Convergence podcast. We hope that you're encouraged and challenged to ask yourself these questions that were posted at the end. God bless you, and we will see you all soon.